As I was meditating, I was practicing Hong Saw. With every saw, I thought God and felt all your spirits lifted up in Him. This is the meaning of my life, if it has any meaning. The things that I've done, I don't think they're very important, except to the extent that they may have helped people individually in their love for God. That's all that matters. It's interesting as I look back, it was always my wish to help people to find something, inspiration, truth, but to me truth meant inspiration. It didn't mean facts, it didn't mean some new system or philosophy, anything like that, but how to be more inspired in life. This I felt deeply. I felt it because I think that everybody who wants to be of help to anyone else, to others in general, has himself suffered in those ways. So that I think people who become doctors have had physical suffering in the past, in past lives or whatever. And because of that, they feel a compassion for people's illnesses. People who want to help people mentally have probably suffered mental illness or great mental distress of one kind or another. And I know that my greatest suffering was always spiritual. The desire for joy, the desire to come out of doubt and confusion, the desire to find what all of us most deeply want. And it's always been a desire of mine. But interestingly enough, you know, it's strange. When I came to Master and he gave me his unconditional love, this was certainly the most important day of my life, the most sacred day of my life. And yet, you know, just as Sri Yukteswar, when you remember Babaji came to him under that banyan tree, and Sri Yukteswar was so excited that he rushed home to get some prasad to bring to him, and when he came, he found him gone. And when he saw Lahiri Mahasaya in Benares at the home of, when he saw Lahiri Mahasaya, Lahiri Mahasaya said, "Didn't you see Babaji?" And he hadn't seen him. And Babaji said, "You must meditate more deeply. You weren't able to see me behind the sunbeams." Babaji's body is not like ours. But interestingly, Sri Yukteswar was a bit hurt. He didn't want to even talk to him. And he said, "Why did you leave me when I went to get you some prasad?" Babaji said, I was fairly extinguished in the ether by your restlessness." Well, that's really how it was with Master when I met him. I was so desirous of being accepted. Just in my mind, I said, you've got to. I just couldn't think of anything else, that you had to accept me. And I know when he touched me, you hear about all these wonderful experiences people have when they meet their guru. Well, he put his finger on my heart, and it vibrated like that for about 2 minutes, I think. You have to think there was something happening. I thought, God, I don't see anything. But you know, from that moment I changed. Really, I was a different person. It's strange because, yes, I came to him deeply desirous, deeply just yearning to be accepted. But the other side of me was that I had never wanted a teacher. I had never thought anybody knew anything. I didn't think I knew anything. And I didn't expect to be finding a guru. A week before I met Master, I'd never heard the word guru. I'd never heard the word yoga. I'd never heard the words karma or dharma or all sorts of things that are common currency today. I didn't know any of these things. I read Autobiography of a Yogi. That was my introduction. I took the next bus across the country, and the first words I said to Master were, "I want to be your disciple."
That's such a touching audio remembrance on, I believe that was his 54th anniversary of that day in September 11th, 1948, when Swami Kriyananda met his guru. And as he says, from his earliest childhood, Swamiji had always been seeking. He had been seeking truth. He didn't really know what it was, but he knew that this world, the things of this world, the career, position, fame, and all those things that so many people seek, it was not going to give him. He knew intuitively that wasn't what he was looking for. He was looking for something else, but he didn't really know what that was. It was only when he met Master Paramhansa Yogananda that he knew he had found that which he had been longing for, which he had been looking for his whole life. And it was as if he had stepped out of his old life and into a new one. And you can compare it, as the Christians say, he was born again. And in a sense, he was. He was born again into a new life, a new identity. Master even referred to him as, his name was James Donald Walters, but Master referred to him as Walter, and this is before he had become Swami Kriyananda. But in a sense, he was a new identity. It was a new self-identity, a sense of who he was, and that was a disciple. He was a disciple, and the perfection of what it meant to be a disciple and to take on that role would be the central theme and the central goal of his entire life thereafter. And in Master, Swamiji recognized his path to freedom. And of course, Master recognized Swami. He recognized him in him. He knew that here was a disciple who would be someone who could carry his work forward. And many of the times that Swamiji said that Master had said to him, remember, you have a great work to do, and you must not disappoint me. And it was Rajarsi Janakananda who later added to that, and remember, Master will give you the strength to do it. Master, Swamiji was dedicated to that, with that resolve to serve his guru, and he'd given his life to him, and there was no going back from that, because in that offering of himself to his guru, he had found what he was looking for in this lifetime. Now, I think Swamiji, to my mind, I came to know him in 1968, and to me, he was a seeker. Now, when I say a seeker, I don't mean just in the way of meaning a seeker of truth. It was his nature to be a seeker of new ways to do things. He was always looking, how can I share these teachings more inspirationally? How can I express this in a better way? How can I reach this group, or how can I reach that group? What can I do? How can I do it better? And how can I be ambitious for Master? And you could say he was on fire to reach people with these teachings, and he even described himself in that terms of fire. He described himself as a volcano, always coming up and looking for ways and new ideas and new technology. And it was kind of a fun thing that I recognized, and many of us recognized in Swami. He was an adopter of new technology. Anytime some new device or gadget would come onto the market, back in when there was recording devices and the tape players and all of these things, which started to flood the market as computers began to be developed in the 1980s. He was, I guess you would call him a first adapter, but it wasn't because he was so curious in technology. And a matter of fact, he was not interested in the technology per se at all, but he saw something new. And his idea was, how can it help spread Master's message? How might this make me able to reach more people with what Master had to offer? And I admired that quality in Swami. He was so creative, always looking, how can I do this better? And whatever he did in life, there was an underlying motive to be of service to his guru. And I admired that quality and found in him my inspiration and a model which I wanted to emulate in my own life, and looking up to that tremendous font of energy, how hard he worked. Now, Swamiji was a genius. He was a real genius, and in the sense of being a person who had insight into so many things, artistic talent in so many ways. And some people seeing him just thought, oh, he can do it so easily because he is a genius, just as people would say to Master, well, he can do it because he's a master. And Master said to those disciples who would say that, yes, but what do you think made me a master? And it was the same thing. People didn't realize with Swami, he really, really worked hard in what he did. And I found that inspirational. But Swami's life was inspiring to me, not because he was perfect in what he did, but because he struggled to become perfect. I admired him not because he had a wonderful personality, but he evolved beyond his personality. So in a sense, he was, and I think all of us can take him as a model of what it means to be discipleship. A discipleship is not a title, it's an attitude, a way of life, an approach to life in every moment. And to be a disciple is to be a pure reflection of and a channel for the Guru's vibration. And certainly that's what I take whenever I think of Swamiji. I see his image, hear his voice, and hear those wonderful recordings like we had a chance to do at the beginning of this program. It was to resonate with this Guru, to be in tune. And this is what Swamiji was in his life, a true disciple. So let us on this day, this anniversary of that momentous day in Swamiji's life, and by extension, it was a momentous day for all of us who follow in Swami's footsteps. Let's take that as our lesson, to emulate his life, and we too can look back on our life when the kind comes to pass, as Swami hoped that he could do when he passed, and look back and have our motto be, he was a good disciple. She was a good disciple. Let us live up to that high standard. I'd like to now invite representatives from the other Ananda centers throughout India, Chennai, Bangalore, and Delhi, to also share about their recollections, the meaning of today's day. And I invite them starting, and then we'll conclude with Diana summing that up. So let us, I believe we're going to start with Chennai and followed by Bangalore.
Namaskaram, everyone, from Ananda, Chennai. And we're talking today about music and the arts at Ananda, really as channeled through Swamiji. When I first came to Ananda in the early 90s, Swamiji was very involved with the music at that time and with all the arts that he was doing. He wrote plays. He at one point had taken, I don't know, hundreds, if not more, photographs of beautiful nature. People were involved in creating a sort of Ananda dance style at the time. Swamiji painted and others also painted. He showed what it was like to be in the flow with Master, in the flow with the divine. And at that time, music was such a beautiful way to become involved and to serve. And I was able to go up on the weekends often because there were concerts happening at Ananda Village. And Swamiji would involve the musicians and singers in his creative process. I don't mean we created, but he allowed us to participate in listening to his new songs. He showed how each note was so important, that he was listening to Master and channeling exactly what the divine wanted. Sometimes he would just change one note here and there. Sometimes when we were performing at the last minute, there would be a change in a word or a change in the melody. And his enthusiasm for the music really awakened all of us to so much enthusiasm. It made us care so deeply also about the music. Dharmarajan and I were also involved in the play, The Peace Treaty. Again, periodically he would come to rehearsals, and you know, when you're in a play, you repeat the words over and over again. These are very inspiring words to repeat. And when Swamiji did come to those rehearsals, he'd make sure we were saying it right, doing it right. I don't mean in a way of perfection, but in a way of the right vibration, tuning into the divine. Swamiji had such high vibration, such high energy in everything he did. And those of us who got to be around that also had to raise our energy in order to participate in his divine flow in that way. And then there were those performance nights, which I think many people remember. They felt magical because Swamiji would sit in the audience and his consciousness would expand through the crowd, through the audience, also to the performers. It was just so beautiful and magical. And we have that ability to create that ourselves, to tune into the divine and master in a way with attunement. You know, one of the great benefits of these arts and the performances we did is it helped create harmony in community. It's such an important thing for us to have. And certainly in music, there is musical harmony, but then also there is harmony between individuals, and not everyone gets along. People are different ideas, different egos. But when you're united in a creative endeavor like music or something in the arts, you have to set aside your differences to unite for that that beautiful performance you're aiming for, or that beautiful channeling of divine energy that you're aiming for. And the other thing too is, Jayaji touched on this, the importance of creativity. Creativity comes when we are attuned to the divine. Well, we can be creative in many ways, but we want to have the creativity come from master. It makes life more interesting. When we're afraid, we're contractive. We can't have any type of problem solving happen. But when we are open to the divine flow, open to grace flowing, we're able to have creative ways to solve issues. And tuning into music, tuning into the arts, that really helps us to get into a creative flow and be able to help our lives through that creativity. Thank you.
I'll just add the thought that Swamiji, in being so creative, not many of us or any of us can approach the level of his genius, as Jayaji was saying, in terms of over 400 pieces of music he created and 149 books. I mean, it would be enough to write one book. So 149, it's just beyond even imagination. And yet he did it, and we watched him do it. But it can inspire us to be creative in our own lives. Master said, do something new every day, and to always be raising our energy in whatever even routine things we're doing, to find a new way to tune into inspiration, as Dharmini was saying. At the same time, Swamiji's creativity did not come from what you might say the usual desire of self-expression. He said that very much, that I'm not expressing myself in these books and through this music. It was in service to Master, and also because Master had given him that job to do in sharing the teachings and sharing with others. And so even though it was very much coming, it was original, as he said, in coming from his point of origin. He said that's what true originality means, not just something different. But also his point of origin was master. And so he in fact wrote about this because we could take the, sorry, my phone deleted the paragraph I was about to read. We could take the message that, well, it's important to just be creative just in general. And Swamiji's creativity was also linked to his position at the very beginning of Master's work and establishing certain directions. Let me read what he has said here. An important part of my own life work has been to carry to its logical conclusion Paramhansa Yogananda's endeavors to show how his spiritual teachings may be applied in more mundane avenues of life. Thus, following his example, I have written books and taught classes which show how to apply those teachings in practical matters, such as leadership, child education, marriage, and worldly success, as examples only. Apart from my books and classes on meditation and other more obviously spiritual topics, I have tried to express in addition the vibrations of my guru's mission through the media of music, photography, and other art forms. It is natural and indeed desirable that departments be formed and dedicated to the spreading of each of these aspects of our work. In these respects, I wanted understood that, first, what I have done was never intended to be comprehensive, but was meant to be seminal in order that others might pursue further in other lines of development the ideas I expressed. Second, my plan has been that this further development continue what I have already set in motion and not take off in what might be termed end runs, initiated in an entirely new or in different ways from those initiated by me and by our line of gurus. Whereas the possibility of such new ways is imaginable, Ananda itself, if it is to remain strong, should endeavor always to honor the traditions from which its particular ray of divine truth has originated. And so let us feel that we are inviting Swamiji and Master's active creativity and inspiration in our lives.
Well, good morning to everyone. We were asked to talk about the wonderful attitude that Swamiji always had from the very, very beginning when he first met Master until his last dying breath. And of course, as Gainamata said, one of the very, very important things that she wanted to give to her disciples was right attitude. And I don't think it's any coincidence that when Swamiji met Gainamata that very first day after coming from New York on that 4-day, 4-night bus ride, he met Gainamata, and Gainamata, because he was dressed in a white palm suit, thinking that that was the appropriate attire here in California, it wasn't in Florida, he found that Gainamata wasn't all that receptive. He was thinking, will the master greet me when I come, as he had read? And he said then, no such luck. And here was Gainamata, but what he didn't know is that she was Yogananda's his second most highly advanced disciple. And so when Gainamata asked, was he the waterman? And he did his best to pronounce Yogananda's name, and she wasn't quite sure what he was talking about and so forth. It was Swamiji's awkward pronunciation because he didn't know. Well, after that meeting, he went on the bus to Hollywood because that's where he was told by Gainamata that Master was speaking that Sunday service. And on the way to Los Angeles, he was upset with Gainamata. It really is a classic. And he was feeling that, he was totally misunderstood. And what did she know? And so on, until he remembered her eyes. And he thought, oh my God, I've judged her harshly. He saw in her eyes in that memory how wise she was. And he asked for forgiveness. And he said at that time, when he asked for forgiveness from inside, sorry, Gainamata, I had no idea when advanced soul you were. He knew inwardly that he was accepted into the work. Many years later, when he had started on it, it was not easy, and his attitude was tested again and again. I was there, I came in 1970, and I had only been there for 6 weeks, and Swami had arrived a week before I had arrived, or a week after teaching classes in San Francisco, earning the money that was needed to build Ananda, which was originally a seclusion retreat. The temple went down. And all of us, of course, were absolutely devastated. And Swamiji and a handful of us were there at the temple site, and there was nothing left. It was just burning embers. And all of us were we were shocked. We didn't have a word to say. We did our best, of course, but it was just too big of a test. Well, what we learned later is that when Swami went back to his dome, so such a short walk from the temple there in the seclusion retreat, he said he felt absolutely numb because he had worked for some years to build not only the temple, but the various facilities there at the seclusion retreat, and it had burnt down. Goodness, what kind of test was this? And what did he do? Just like with Gainamata, he went inside and realized that this was something that basically simple enough. He had done this for God. He had done this for his son. And so again, going to Divine Mother, he said, this was for you. And so as he shared with us later, he felt this bliss because he had given everything to Divine Mother and this temple too. And this joy came over him. And so the sweet story came from that he shared with us, that there was such joy. He said, well, why didn't you take the dining room too? And so that was one of our fun stories and continues to be, because what depth he had to go to in order to reach to that point in his heart and in his soul. But okay, Divine Mother, we'll rebuild again, and of course we did. But throughout the many, many years that Swami was building Ananda, and at one point someone said, would you start another community? And of course he did through others, and he was the inspiration for that. But they were asking, would he personally start another community? He stuck his tongue out and said, no. And yet, though he was laughing and smiling and so on, been there, done that. Now it was time for all of us, drawing from his example, to do what we could to continue as we do to this day, to build Ananda. Sometimes I like to share with people when they'll say, oh, you were there the early years, the good old days. And I say, my goodness, it's still the good old days. Just this morning, the internet went out for us here in Bangalore. It's the good old days. And I was enjoying so much. Our little tech crew here all clustered together, and I enjoyed looking at their faces. All I saw was a bunch of smiles. And I thought, do they know what they're doing? They're all smiling. And it was the joy of Divine Mother has sent a test, as we learned from Swami, the right attitude from the Ainamata as an example, and all the great ones, that it's all about going inside and rising to the occasion. And that is life. Throughout life, it's again the challenge, rise to the occasion, rise to the occasion. And Swami one time as a closing point, and this is beyond dramatic, I wasn't there at the time, but he had a satsang in Delhi, and he was very ill. And I was told, and it's true, that he arrived in an ambulance. My gosh, you could have had Jyotish or someone, give the satsang. What is this? And yet, that was his determination, always to rise above the body, rise above his personality, to master, to have the right attitude. And right attitude, of course, is everything. So Thank you, Swamiji, for that example that continues, of course, to this day.
The underlying theme of Swamiji's life was attunement with his guru. Those who knew him or met him in the last years of his life would often see him in a blissful state, in a state of grace, of inwardly communing with his guru. And at that time, he said that he didn't know where Kriyananda ended and where Yogananda began, that he would try to make every thought he had be Yoganandaji's thought. And at this time in Gurgaon, he wrote a masterpiece, The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And through that, it's as if his guru wrote the book through him. It's a miracle how he wrote this 600-page book in less than 2 months. And he felt that the words just flowed so quickly and so perfectly. They flowed as fast as he could type them. But he said that when he first met his guru in 1948, he was a very different person. And he was always seeking. He recognized Yoganandaji as his guide right away. And yet he said he himself was in a psychological labyrinth. He said he was overly intellectual, that he was very critical and given to negative moods, and that he couldn't accept the miracles in the autobiography because of all the spiritual doubts that he had. And he attributes the change in himself over the years to his guru's grace. And as Jaya said, he saw that his mission was to be the best disciple that he could. And when I met him in 1971, he was halfway through his life. And what I saw in him was enough to convince me to commit my life to helping him manifest in some way the great work that his guru had for him to do. And this dramatic transformation in Swamiji, from the moment that he met his guru until his last days, this transformation, he shows us, is available to all of us. Yoganandaji said once how there are many rats and mice in the canyons below the ashram, and they're not progressing spiritually. In other words, being with the guru is not enough. One must make the spiritual effort as well. And Swamiji continued to draw new inspiration, new direction from his guru until his final days. And this too, he shows us, we can draw on. We simply need to make the spiritual effort to draw that inspiration to ourselves at any time in our lives. Jaya.
Good morning. It's such a joy to be able to honor Swami Kriyananda during this very special occasion of his spiritual birthday. We all consider it our spiritual birthday also, and we often say to each other, happy birthday, because without Swamiji having crossed the country and taken discipleship with our guru that day, this day 73 years ago, none of us would be here, and we would not have our beautiful, beautiful Ananda spiritual family to help support each other and help each other focus on the goal of finding union with God, finding union with our gurus. And Swami's consciousness has led the way ever since that day, 73 years ago. And, you know, you can also imagine what Master thought when Swamiji arrived, a little green behind the ears, as Swami was just saying himself. But he said, Master vibrated his finger on his heart for 2 minutes, and something must have happened. Well, look what happened. And Master, within 2 months, had Swami lecture in his place in the San Diego church. And I think you all know the story that Swami himself had put the ad in the paper that after a long absence, Master would be back again at the San Diego church and lecturing. So there was a huge crowd, people coming in from the windows and the doors, and it was overflowing. And Master said, Walter, used to call Swami Walter, you'll have to take my place for this lecture. Swami Kriyananda was there for 2 months at the ashram in Mount Washington. But as always, Swami Kriyananda said, yes, sir. Yes, my guru, I will do your will. And despite all his trepidation, he opened himself to feeling his guru flow through him while giving that lecture. And it was, according to Yogananda, it was a success. But mostly it was a very big step in Swami's discipleship in just saying yes to life. Swami always tells us, say yes to life. Say yes to whatever the guru is asking of you. And within 6 months, Master had Swami give Kriya initiation to somebody at, I believe it was at Hollywood Church. And I'm not sure that even Swami Kriyananda had Kriya initiation at that point. He was just learning Kriya. And so Master had so much faith in Swamiji's ability to be an instrument of his vibration in this world. And as Jaya said, saw in him a mutual enthusiasm of taking these teachings all over the world. Master crossed the United States again and again, sharing the teachings of Kriya Yoga, of the great masters of this path, to people all over America. And Swamiji, with his life, did the same, crossed America, moved to Europe much later in his life to start a work, and then at 77, moved to India with a handful of his close friends to help start the work and make Yogananda's name more and more known in the land of his birth. And so Swami had this same expansive nature. And as Jaya also said, Master and Rajaji said, you have a great work to do. And Swami has often looked at all of us and said, you are the strength that Master has given me to help follow through with his mission. And Swami Kriyananda had very many tests and obstacles and trials in his life, as almost all of us know. But he saw those through with faith, that his guru was guiding him. He felt his guru's smile in his heart throughout all the difficulties and obstacles that he came in building Master's work through Ananda. And Swami had that openness of a disciple. He had that willingness. And most of all, he had that willingness to actively participate in Master's mission, in Master's will for him. And Swami, in giving us Ananda, has given us that opportunity also to get in touch with the vibration of our guru and to act as instruments. Because really what Ananda is and what Swami has given us is opportunities to receive Master's vibration, to receive the ray of light of our gurus. Master and Swami would often quote St. John, to those who received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. And what Swami has created was a way for us to receive the transforming light and power of our guru. Swami was that clear window through which our Guru's vibration could flow. And as we receive that vibration, we ourselves are transformed. And Swami has told us this is the reason for Ananda. And even, through all that Swami has accomplished, his books, his communities, the songs, the education, the schools, everything that Swami has accomplished, he never ever gave credit to himself. And he said, these really aren't important. If I am able to awaken the love of my Guru's heart in souls everywhere, then I have done what my Guru has asked me to do. So I am particularly, and all of us are particularly grateful to Swamiji for giving this opportunity to all of us to act as channels and act as instruments of the ray of divine light of our divine masters and of our beloved Guru. So thank you, Swamiji.
Hello, everyone. It's really a wonderful occasion, very holy, very blessed for all of us who have been with such a great soul, Swami Kriyananda ji. Someone told me the other day that they were talking with a man, an elderly person, who had read autobiography of a yogi, and he was explaining to him that he was on this path. And the elderly gentleman said, well, Yogananda ji passed. He left his body some years back. Who was your teacher? And this Guru Bhai of ours, he said, Swami Kriyananda. And that man said, you are very lucky to have merited such a great soul to guide you. And I remember once when Swamiji was writing the Bhagavad Gita, essence of the Bhagavad Gita, as Keshavaji was saying, and there was a vibration in the house. Many of you had been to that house, Guru Kripa, and it was so deep for those couple of months that he was writing. And I went, many of us went to read various times parts of the book. And one time, as I was leaving, I just felt so strongly, like never before, that Master was there with Swamiji. And the next day, some of us asked him, we said, Swamiji, is Master here while you're writing this? And he said, oh, yes. And of course, we were so moved. We were so touched to hear that Master was living in that house. But it came to us later, he was living in Swamiji. So of course he was there. And Master gave to Swamiji such a wonderful gift, the gift of himself, the gift of God, the gift of his consciousness, his vibrations, his grace, his blessings. He poured those into Swamiji as Swamiji lived with him, as Swamiji blessed him many times, gave him Kriya many times, as Swamiji worked with him, had him do various projects. Master blessed Swamiji deeply. And what is so clear in my mind now is that Master gave to Swamiji what Swamiji has given to us. And Swamiji has given us Master. His vibrations, his love, his life, his consciousness, and teachings and techniques These are all wonderful. But what Master implanted in Swamiji, he gave those vibrations to all of us. And so when Swamiji was able to, do the various things that Master asked him to do. He could do yoga postures when before that he couldn't really do yoga postures hardly at all, but he became known as the expert in Hatha Yoga there at Mount Washington. And he could remember phrases that Master told him in different Indian languages. Then, as Daya said, that he was able to teach on Master's behalf, give Kriya on Master's behalf. He was able to do so many things because Master was living in him. And so as we go forward, we don't want to go forward with just teachings. We don't want to just go forward with, oh, Swamiji did this, so we should do this. He said that, so we should say that. We have to go forward with that vibration that Swamiji implanted in every book, in every lecture, in every chant, in every song, in every one of us when he blessed us, in every satsang. He gave us Master, and he's expecting us to give that to everyone whom we meet. And yes, we can serve in so many ways. We can serve in selling books and having a boutique and being a teacher of meditation and yoga, and there's so many ways. But if it's not done with that spirit, that Master is within us, then why really do it? And so in these times, let us remember the biggest gift that Master gave to Swamiji was himself. And Swamiji gave that to us. To all who received, as Daya said, he gave it to each of us. And that's what Swamiji expects us to carry forward. If in addition to that, the teachings, the techniques, and all wonderful, but without the right spirit, none of it really matters. Swamiji told some of us later on in his life here in India, he said it's not enough to give a class, you have to give vibrations and bliss. And that's the only purpose of Ananda. And so as we go forward, let us remember Swamiji's vibrations, his consciousness, his awareness, his expansiveness. I remember finally that someone was coming down, one of the monks, in a meeting with Swamiji. They had had a meeting with him. It was in Guru Kripa, his house too, many years back, of course. And they came down the stairs, and I looked at that person, and they were just a being of light. And I said, well, how did your meeting go with Swamiji? And they just looked at me, and he said, I realize Swamiji's counting on us. I think that's the thing to remember. Swamiji is counting on those who he's trained, who he's loved, who he's taken to Master. He's counting on us to take his spirit, his vibration, which is Master's now, and share it with everyone. God bless you.